The maintenance that needs to be done on the outside of the house is the same kind of inspection and maintenance that needs to be done under your house. Don't always trust the trades that come by to do things for you. For example, cable installers. But the problem is that they don't have the same standards that some of the electricians and plumbers do. And so they'll just punch holes in whatever and not worry about if it's sealed or not, and then you get rodent intrusion. It's definitely important to make sure that you have somebody coming behind, be able to have these things looked at.
Next in line, Charles, you ready for us?
Yeah, let's do it. So I'm talking about crawl spaces. Crawl spaces would be a home with a raised foundation. So just to kind of explain a little bit of the difference there, some homes are built on what's called a concrete slab foundation. And basically when they're building the home, instead of putting in walls and poured concrete and building the house over the top of a foundation that's raised up so that you can actually crawl under it, add piping, whatnot, a slab foundation would be a foundation that is basically all concrete. They just put forms on the outside and they fill the entire thing with concrete, smooth it out, and then your entire floor structure is concrete. So there's no crawling under it. Anything they're going to put in, plumbing, into your bathrooms, any of that stuff, it's all built into the slab. And so raised foundation or crawl space homes make it actually a lot easier to do upgrades if you ever want to in the future. Definitely something to think about when you're buying a home is if you want to do some kind of upgrades in the future to where you're going to move things around in bathrooms and all that, as opposed to having somebody come in with a jackhammer and actually have to jackhammer up the floors and change a lot of things. With a raised foundation, as long as the support is there, you can actually move things around and change things without having to do that. And then same thing with adding additional things like piping, electrical, and all that. That can all be done from underneath the house. Before I started doing this, there was nothing about going under a house that sounded appealing to me whatsoever. Obviously, there still isn't, but it's actually not as bad as I ever thought it was going to be. But there's a lot to a home with a raised foundation that should be inspected and should be looked at on a regular basis. And so I actually have a tool that I use when I'm doing my raised foundation homes. It's basically a radio controlled vehicle with cameras installed and lighting. And so what that allows me to do with the cameras that I have, it allows me to actually have a view that most people wouldn't have when they're crawling at home. So that's one of the things that is obviously very helpful in a situation, because as a person crawling through a house, you're looking around, but you're not looking around all the time, the entire time you're crawling around. In fact, some of the times you're crawling, you're looking over here and you're crawling and you're moving around, but you're not going to get the same vantage point that this tool that I have will. The other thing that's really nice about it, especially during the winter months, when you have some crawl spaces, it's very common to have crawl spaces with standing water in them or just muddy, from all the rains that we get. The nice thing about this is I can actually drive this thing around in the mud or at least 4 to 5 inches of water and actually be able to do an inspection on a home that we might not have ever been able to do in a normal circumstance. Because trying to crawl through a home, a sub area that's flooded, there's a lot of hazards that come along with that. Some of these soils have different chemicals in them just from the years. There's also sometimes, as you can see in this picture, electrical wires that are hanging down into the crawl space and could be potentially hazardous. So there's a lot of different situations that crawling through a flooded crawl space could present a hazard to the person that's doing it. And so having something like this, it's already hazardous as it is, but having this kind of a tool makes it definitely a lot better to do that. I talk about this all the time, deferred maintenance and whatnot. The maintenance that needs to be done on the outside of the house is the same kind of inspection and maintenance that needs to be done under your house. And then don't always trust the trades that come by to do things for you. For example, cable installers, obviously we love our TV, but the problem is that most of the people that do that, they don't have the same standards in some cases that some of the electricians and plumbers do. And so they'll just, punch holes in whatever and not worry about, if it's sealed or not, and then you get rodent intrusion. And then they'll just leave cables, all over the ground and, poke holes and do all these things. So it's definitely important to make sure that you have somebody coming behind. Obviously, most homeowners don't want to do this. It's definitely a good idea, to have good people that you trust, be able to have these things looked at. So in this particular case, this home actually had pretty severe rot underneath one of the bathrooms. One of the tests that home inspectors and pest inspectors will do a flood test. And what that entails is taking a tile shower pan and actually filling it up with a small amount of water, maybe about an inch or so of water. The shower pan is not supposed to leak at any point. Obviously, you're not filling up the shower when you're taking it. You're just standing there and the water's, rushing down, whatever it is. But that shower pan is supposed to be waterproof. When it all is installed, there's a waterproofing membrane or material that goes down before the tile is actually installed. and it's not meant to leak. Obviously, if it leaks and allows water through, then you start to have problems like this here. And what's happened is over time, water's leaked through that. This has failed so badly that literally water leaks through this all the time. And as you can see,
wait. Question: did you just leave the bathroom running while you went underneath with your little drone?
Well, here's the thing. The other thing that's super awesome about this thing, number one, I didn't leave it running, so I left water in it. But the best part about this is that I can drive this around and stand in the bathroom and run water.
Oh yeah,
so I can go into the bathroom, flush the toilet, and be underneath the toilet at the same time and verify that toilet is leaking right then and there, right? So what I did was I put a stopper over the top of the shower. Shower stalls are about 2-3 inches high, 4 inches high, and I filled it up with about 1 inch of water. And so there's grout and all the joints and everything at the bottom. And so what's happened is that seal that's on that pan has failed. And so anytime you take a shower, even though you're not filling it up with water, the reason why we fill it up with water is because it's a much more obvious sign that we can see that the seal on that pan has failed. Now, when you're just taking a shower, it slowly drips through and all the time. And again, no one else is doing that. This is just a normal use of a shower, right? But that's what's happened over the years from just use of that shower. It's leaked through constantly, right? So now that wood is rotted, and now, the area down below is destroyed. And so what needs to happen now, unfortunately, is a beautiful shower stall needs to be ripped out and it needs to be re-waterproofed. And so this is the kind of thing that you would not know unless you had somebody look in your crawl space to make sure that it's actually in good shape. The other things that we find are, improper repairs to structure, piping that's leaking. Sometimes we just run into a drainage piping that's leaking. Most of the time, that's not as big of a deal. I've posted on my Instagram on a few different occasions. We go into these crawl spaces and sometimes the pipes are just broken and completely disconnected. These ABS pipes are pretty resilient, but sometimes there's damages that occur from other people that are going down there, or just movement over years of time, heat and cold, and maybe a rodent or something else got down there and did whatever. But the thing about it is that all of this should be looked at. And if you're gonna buy a house, you wanna make sure that this is all in good shape. So underneath this is actually the drain for the shower stall right here, this area right here. But this whole shower stall takes up this whole area right here. You can tell that they've done some previous repairs in here as well. The thing about crawl spaces, the other thing is, for example, somebody came in at some point and they did some repairs, or they did some additions here, and they took out a post that was attached to this pier right here. So they're actually compromising the structure of the house because they removed something that should have been there just to install this pipe right here. Yeah. So this particular house, it was like wavy and had all kinds of situations going on. But again, this is the kind of thing why it's important to really take a look at these crawl spaces. And again, the great thing about this tool, like I said, is it can pretty much go anywhere, almost through anything, drive over anything. And again, this is a advantage that you're not going to be able to see in most cases.
Did you make this RV tool for the crawl space inspections, or do they actually sell something like this for inspectors?
They do sell these. They actually do sell these for inspectors. Number one, I don't particularly like a lot of what's on the market. Number two, they're insanely expensive and, in my opinion, not worth what you're paying for. The vehicle that I chose, actually a decent price that made sense. I actually like it because it's got a big wide platform, a lot harder to flip over, because what happens is if it flips over, then you're going in the crawl space and you're going to go get it, So yeah. In this particular case, this one, I actually put this one together. I'm comfortable with it. And then I added in cameras that, in my opinion, in this case, I like the idea of having the 360 camera because it's always recording and it's always going. And then I have another camera that I actually use to drive it around so I can see, and it's Wi-Fi, so I can go anywhere in the house and actually do this inspection while I'm doing it.
Yeah, so that's smart. That's smart that you put a 360 camera on it.
Yeah, and like I said, it's always recording, right? So I actually have a different vantage point than I do even during the inspection while I'm doing it, right? So I can come back and review that footage. Obviously, it's great to have the knowledge of knowing all of these different things. And when you're doing these inspections, you need to know what you're looking for. You need to have that knowledge. But, at the same time, having good tools and being able to do things that you might not necessarily be able to do, you want to be able to get as many things inspected for that client as possible, right? So before, you might have a rainy day where, you can't get on the roof and look at it, or you might have a roof that's so high and it's raining and you just can't look at it, right? I can run a drone up there or whatever it is. Well, a lot of times you can't run drones during the rain and during windy days unless you have a very expensive drone, right? So I just use a pole camera, so I can actually see, all around that roof. But then the idea is instead of telling my client, hey, you need to go get another roofer or whatever to come out here and then delaying the transaction. It's like, let's get as much done as we can now, get you as much information as you can now so that you can make this decision. And that's really what it comes down to when you do all of this stuff, right? You need to make sure you have a great educated decision. That way you can decide whether or not you want to actually make this purchase or not. But again, crawl space is very, very important. The other thing is having a pest inspector go under there and check to see if there's termites or any other kind of fungus growth, wood-destroying organisms or insects.
Leo doesn't just review the footage that you took and just kind of, okay.
No, pest inspectors, and that's the thing, if this is flooded, the pest inspector can't inspect it. This is a home inspection thing only. Pest inspectors need to crawl every wood member. If there's a problem, they need to actually poke in there and really check. They need to verify these things. So it's a little different for a pest inspector, and that's unfortunate. It's what's required for a home inspector. I'm already just looking through the same stuff myself. I'm not poking for rot or any of that stuff, and I'm not looking for termites. I'm looking for a whole different scope of things. With this tool, everything that I need to do with this tool, I can see everything that I need to see so that I can give a good inspection. But unfortunately, pest inspectors, for now, right, you know somebody's going to invent something that's got a little arm that pokes in there for you and checks, you know, and it's only a matter of time. But yeah, pest inspectors have to do a much deeper inspection and much more in-depth. So unfortunately, when it's wet and muddy like that, it just makes it a lot harder. But normally what we would end up doing is telling them, well, hey, you know, you got to dry the sub area out. You got to, but that takes a long time. It takes a good amount of time. If it's just muddy, you know, you can get in there with a Tyvek suit and get in there and you're usually okay. But when it's like soaking and you're like crawling down and you can't get around it, it makes it very difficult or impossible to get into these spaces safely.
No, I believe you. I remember one time I ordered a pest inspection from you guys because my sellers was home. My seller was like, Chia, that dude just poking on my outside trim with a screwdriver. Why is he doing that? I'm like, that means he spotted some dry rot.
Let me talk about that for a second too, okay? That's the thing. We get so many people that get upset. I understand. I get it. It looks like crap afterwards, right? But here's the thing. That wood would have not crumbled or even been able to be poked into if it wasn't rotted. So I understand that it looks bad and you just poked a bunch of holes in my house, but you have a bunch of rot all over your house and you have to identify it, right? So no, I get it and I totally understand, but this is the point. If the wood wasn't rotted, you can't just stab into a piece of wood with a screwdriver and it's gonna stab into wood. Is a very, you know, unless you're dealing with pine, it's a very hard product. It's not like you can just poke at it. If you can poke at it, it's rotted. And when it just crumbles to nothing, it's been rotted for a while.
I know. One time, I swear, it wasn't my seller. I was representing the buyers. The pest inspector just started poking on some outside trim on the garage, and the wood just collapsed and broke to pieces. And the owners were home. The owner was like, "You guys better pay for that." And then we're like, "That's a rotted piece of trim, sir." But the pest inspector didn't even poke it that hard. He literally just got his sharp little screwdriver and just kind of poked it, you know, and it just broke to pieces. And it got the owner super pissed off. But yeah, I could kind of see that.
There's some things that are pretty obvious and you can just kind of put a little bit of pressure on it and you know it's rotted. You don't even need to poke it. Like it's all shriveled up and just rotted, you know that. But when it comes to certain things, that's the point. It's like you gotta push on it a little bit. And then the other thing too, so what they'll do is, because you don't know any better, right? A really bad handyman will come in there and just glob a bunch of caulking in there or some kind of wood filler or something, thinking, oh yeah, that's fine. That'll take care of it, right? It's smooth now. And then they paint over it and it's all good. So what the pest inspector does is then they go in there and they poke in those areas that are always suspect, especially in the corners where the wood joints meet. They poke in those areas that are suspect and then they poke it and it's soft, but then it kind of pushes in because it's the caulking, right? You gotta understand, it's like this is a living organism, you know, it's rotting the wood, it's eating away at it, right? So you can't just put some stuff on it and call it good. You gotta cut it out. It's like a cancer. You gotta cut it out to stop it from continuing to grow.
Nope, I agree, man. That's some good stuff. Thank you for sharing that video. That was pretty cool how you show that 360 footage down there. That's a very unique perspective. And I think that's it. Thank you for all the comments. Yeah, we would like to talk more about that and engage more with you guys on that. But other than that, we will let you guys go. Later, everybody. Have a good night. Chi fams.